Thanks for joining me today for another of my tidbits of timely truths. I've now been a senior pastor for 32 years. I pastored 9 different churches over that time span. And while it's such a blessing to get to live out the calling to ministry that God called me to at the age of 13, there's been some challenges and conflicts along the way. Now, most of them were manageable, but there was always one consistent issue that was present in each of those 9 churches that I pastored, which to this day I've had to try to balance in the congregations in which I've served. What's that issue? Musical worship. It seems as if musical taste or preference has become a precondition for worship. I've found over the course of my ministry, when it comes to the type of worship and song in those churches that I've both pastored and attended, solving that problem can be a tough nut to crack. No matter what the decision or the outcome might be, someone is always going to be left feeling let down. And even though my solution has always been to try to balance the new contemporary worship songs with the old hymns, which, let me just say, I love and which I cut my teeth on growing up in church, I still seem to disappoint those who have one of those styles of worship as a preference. I've often wondered, with so many worship preferences, so many different tastes and values in the sanctuary, it's amazing that we've never had tomatoes thrown or teeth knocked out or tantrums being thrown over the type of worship songs that are being sung. Part of that issue, I believe, is that people are so doggone picky. As I said, I love the old hymns, but I also really love the contemporary songs that not only play on our Christian music radio stations, in which those who are new to our services can identify with, but they've become such an integral part of praise and worship in many of our church services. But here's what I see to be the real problem. It's not the tastes or the preferences of the ones who have gathered to worship. The problem is the heart of those who feel as if they can't worship unless their particular preference is being catered to. Is that true for everyone who's come to worship? Absolutely not. Thank the Lord for that. But you see, many have drawn a straight line from "does this please me" to "does it please God?" True worship, I believe, should be typified by 3 directions: upward to love and honor God, outward to serve and uplift one another, and inward to encourage our own silly hearts and tired minds to respond in worship. But the problem comes when we add a 4th direction, which is we're to like this music. Now that reverses the threefold process, and it ends up looking like this. You have a double inward. Do I feel like I'm being entertained by? And do I feel comfortable with the music? Inward, do I feel like I can respond to God in worship? Outward, do I feel like I can encourage others to worship to this style? Upward, do I feel like God is pleased with what I'm doing? Perhaps you heard a familiar phrase in each of those misled directions. The phrase is, "do I feel?" which makes worship self-serving rather than God-serving. And that's a huge problem when you consider that biblical worship always included sacrifice and humility, or making God bigger and ourselves smaller. Maybe it's not that straightforward, but I hope you can see the problem. If our ability to worship is governed by our acceptance of whatever the music provided, everything stops working. To put it another way, if worship must first address our conditions and preferences, we won't be worshiping at all, even when they do. If the music fits us so perfectly that we're able to switch on our worship mode, then it's very likely not worship that we're doing. And it's not that we can't worship to whatever the musical preference is. Of course we can. The problem is making our worship and our adoration of God conditional upon our individual music preference. Friends, our love for God shouldn't be conditional upon anything other than how much He loves us. I wish I had $1 for every time I've heard something similar to these remarks being made about our style of worship. First one, I can't worship to the drumbeat of drums. Or I can't worship when an organ is being played. Or the music is too loud to worship. Or the music is overwhelming the worship leader. Or I can't focus on God because the singer was slightly off key. Or finally, God can't get through to me when it's just the instruments playing without someone singing. I understand some of the things in some of our songs can be distracting. But that's a trait that I believe we've perfected with time. It's a hard issue when we don't even try to worship if our preferences aren't being met. Well, I have a solution. Oh, it's still going to make someone upset, I guarantee it, but because their preferences won't be entirely catered to. You see, I've tried to balance my worship services over the years to provide both hymns and contemporary songs, but that still doesn't often satisfy. Again, here's my suggested solution. Whether singing hymns or contemporary worship, if it doesn't suit your particular taste or preference, quickly look around and find someone who is worshiping and being blessed by their own particular taste or preference, and rejoice that worship is happening. Your turn will come. So then quickly make a decision to worship and rejoice that God is being exalted even through that kind of music. Friends, remember this. Worship is not about us. It's about God. It's not about how it makes me feel. It's all to worship Him. Hey, join me for another tidbit very soon. Thanks for joining me today.